Okay, well, I'm going to open the second Pay to Rely committee meeting of LawFi DAO. The meeting is being recorded, so at the moment or subsequently, if you're not willing to consent to the recording, please let me know at jp@lawfidao.com and we'll make sure that the recording is edited. Today on the agenda, we have a bit of a walkthrough planned of the Open Zeppelin standard contracts. Open Zeppelin being a security standard of sorts for how they approach the writing and the deployment of various contracts, including that famous ERC20 fungible token standard. And we'll just walk through the interface and some of the prompts, that being the interface that a lot of developers and non-developers would typically be fronted with as they're trying to figure out what variables or how they fill out the variables for their particular token. And this is in contrast to other DAO packages or DAO for DAOs. Some others have referred them to, like Colony, Aragon, Kali DAO, that's Kali, where you go to their user interfaces and they try to step you through a process of initial establishment of a DAO, which begins with your deployment and then distribution of tokens. Whereas Open Zeppelin is from the perspective of not to help you create your DAO, it's just for more secure deployment of smart contracts. So if I can share screen, I will attempt to, and I'll just say welcome Vic and Electra and Baron while I'm trying to navigate.
Hello, I'm eating lunch, so I'm on off screen.
That's okay. Can you see that window, the Open Zeppelin window?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great. So if I mean, go back to this website and explore it at your leisure. It's fantastic. But to just try and navigate straight to the ERC20 contract, I've clicked Get Started. Probably should have arranged for someone from Open Zeppelin to take us through this walkthrough rather than me. But you can see on the left-hand menu that you've got a sub-panel for tokens, ERC20s and creating supply, and a couple of others referred to. You might be aware of the ERC 721, which is the non-fungible token standard, and I'll skip down to the 1155, which is colloquially referred to as semi-fungible because it's a tiered approach. There is an NFT at the sort of top level, but then there's a number of mini or sub-fungible tokens that relate to the top tier NFT, to speak very basically about it. And then if you scroll further down the menu, you've got a number of other options that you can explore and walk through. So if I just click, I'll click initially on tokens, just to give a snapshot of your experience, the explainer or the primer, that there's different kinds of tokens and standards. And then we'll go to the ERC20 specifically. So we know that it creates a fungible token that is openly transferable and upgradable. So when we're trying to understand the facts of a token issuance and who is the person, the natural person or a recognized legal person behind that issuance that could have regulatory and tax obligations, we can start from this interface. So I won't go through the whole process, but it talks you through each of the components of the fungible token, well, the source code, the programming. If I skip down here to creating supply now, this is really the variables that I want to understand. Most Well, a number of DAOs have a fixed supply of their DAO tokens. And that goes to the tokenomics of trying to create scarcity and perhaps some pressure that the more demand there is for that particular token, then in theory, the price that a person is willing to pay goes up if there is that permanent supply. So fixing it can be specified here in your total supply field of the ERC20 contract. Now, I suppose I'll just pause and put your hand up and happy to direct the conversation to you so that this is less of a lecture or a tutorial style. But for you, even as an accountant or a professional, what does this fixed supply decision mean to you, and what legal considerations are starting to trigger for you? Vic, I see you have your hand up.
Hey, Jodie. So I think the first thing that I want to think about in terms of fixed supply is, okay, what are the legal services that we could be providing? We've already got a couple of people that are interested. I'm going to give you a real world hypothetical, a roadmap on how to conduct a carbon trading platform, and what that roadmap might look like if you're going to roll out in Australia. So I'd be thinking about fixed supply in terms of how many iterations of this advice. Well, first of all, is the advice something that is replicable without customization specific to the client? And how many iterations of that am I comfortable, or is the DAO comfortable in making available for the set price that we want to make the token purchasable at?
Yeah, well, and with carbon credits, I mean, I'm sure that there's a number of different schemes, but that may not be so easy to say that there's a fixed supply, because as more trees are planted or more soil is nurtured, you perhaps can capture more carbon, which might be part of your carbon scheme or the tokenomics. So depending on how many different tokens there are in an economy, yeah, that reduces the amount of standardization, and you're getting very much into that legal advice, bespoke customization territory. But for the DAO governance token, the mechanism that is used to vote, if it's the bare bones governance token, then perhaps you could go here and there could be some basic information given about just in relation to a governance token, and no other activities are anticipated other than expressing a sentiment or voting. So that could be giving a level of standardization. Does that answer your question or hypothetical?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of a simpler thing that's sort of much more cut, copy, repeat. Maybe a privacy policy. Would a privacy policy as a legal deliverable, would that be open to being an unlimited supply?
Well, I think it's to take it back a step. You could do a similar approach to what Open Zeppelin is doing. So instead of focusing on a smart contract, the product is the privacy policy, and our first variable in this case is a fixed supply, but the first variable in a privacy policy might be what platforms or what other services are used to collect a person's personal information. So, they might be using Google Docs, they might be using a CRM, and it maybe prompts them to fill in all of those. And then when you get into APIs or some of the other things that are available through Open Zeppelin, every time you update that or add to your administrative tooling to enhance your collection and use of and hopefully make it even more privacy preserving, that you're updating your privacy policy and getting people to be notified that it's been updated. Is that the direction of your question, or are you looking at something else?
I'm just thinking about how to tokenize legal products and legal services. So yeah, I think it's more just exploration of how the token standard can be used and what are the variables that we're going to be playing with.
Yeah, well, a different but related concept is that to be more privacy preserving, you can tokenize the data or the fact that we've received a verification that a person is over 18 or that they're an Australian resident, rather than storing that information. So when it goes back to if a fungible token is used as a membership and a governance token, so there's an exchange of personal information on a different system, so email, not just the blockchain, can the tokenization of that data somehow be reflected in what is the fixed supply? So you'll never have more than 20,000 members, for example. So you never, but I'm not sure that it quite works in that context. So maybe we can explore that further once we go through the next couple of variables. Because this is a regulatory point, like the issue of a fungible token, which can increase and decrease in value and that is globally tradable. That's the thing that, does it escape regulatory capture or not? Or is it an exercise that is properly within, you know, the Australian jurisdiction or another jurisdiction? And from this interface, it's not attempting to deal with the legal, but could we do something that helps a person understand that it's not just a simple matter of deploying the contracts, you also need to have the legal and tax considerations in mind too. So could we even add some prompts or approach organizations like Open Zeppelin to give that sort of prompting? So then I think, yeah, I won't read through all of these things, but let's just go down to, I wanted to find the place where it specifies owners and controllers, and I can't easily find that now. So I might just open it up to the floor in a general context while I'm trying to navigate back to the place where it steps you through, and just throw it open. So Vic, Varun, or Electra, if you could direct people, you know, clients, potential clients, or people in the community that you hear, oh, we've got this great DAO idea, we're just going to use Open Zeppelin's type contracts, or we're going to use Colony. What strikes in your mind as the easiest way to direct them to a legal resource that says, well, these are the things that you should step through, even checklists, before you just go through the process of deploying a token? Does anything come to mind?
I think you've identified the gap in the market they're doing.
Yeah.
When it comes to creating something like this, the effort required to get across the space to then, you know, knowledgeably create something, as opposed to spend lots of money to somebody that will tell you what they can create for you. I mean, there's always that trade-off between paying someone for their knowledge and their time to make it easy and the risk that you run in not knowing how to do it. So I think that I'm not really sure what resources are out there in terms of supporting the creation of smart legal contracts and the tokens that they represent. But I think it's more that type of information I've tended to crowdsource and, you know, go to the people that I need to speak to understand how that works. And I think that slowly over time we will accumulate that knowledge through trial and error and doing it ourselves. So we can develop those materials internally within the DAO.
That's right. Varun, Electra, any thoughts that come to mind? Yeah. No, it's tough because it also depends on a number of things, including the inertia. You know, why do I have to be the one that speaks to a lawyer when everybody else is just deploying it? And the longer that it takes for regulators to speak up and be active, even in community events, to be raising these things, the more I fear that there is this legitimate expectation in the community that all of this is fine, that you can just deploy technology.
Also, one of the things is, as obviously someone from a non-legal background, a lot of people don't approach lawyers mainly because one, they wouldn't know what area of expertise what lawyer is in, or who would be the right kind of lawyer, and they don't want to be going for three different passes to three different lawyers. Or if they're starting up small, they don't want to be not having an idea about the fees, consideration, etc. Because if like if that's something which is more clear that for this fees you would get XYZ, you would get from point A of your thought process from a DAO to where you could be initiating a DAO and having say you could be issuing tokens for X fees, or even something like these are the 5 steps and first 3 steps would cost so much, but you would be at this point where you could then pursue whether you want to go ahead, kind of a thing. So I think there's that black box in between, which a lot of people who are getting into this are not clear about.
I think there's also a great points for Brent. I think that there's like the DAO has a lot of positive sentiment towards it. I have a client that I ventured the idea of becoming the DAO's first client, or delivering a piece of advice through the DAO and having the advice basically available after its production, available to anybody else. And the client loved it, absolutely loved it. And so we have our first client, our first beta client. And I think that when we have the opportunity to be able to share the good news story of being able to provide advice at, you know, a fraction of the cost that our clients collectively can find in the market, that's an incredibly powerful message. And that might, I don't think that one instance of that will turn the tide, but when we start being able to create bodies of information that people can access and rely on it and pay an affordable price to rely on it, that inertia against seeking legal advice early, and the fact that it is accessible, that message will spread. So I think we just need to rely on the network effect of the positive contribution that we're making into the community.
I think that's right, and I'm really excited to see what the effects are on the existing legal services market, whether there would be an influx of people, well, innovators that really identify with that message, that once they cover, you know, new ground, but other innovations that are not necessarily doing, they're not a lending protocol if the first one was a lending protocol, but there's still a level of leveraging up that the Web3 industry could have. I wonder whether the existing law firms will either match the LawFi DAO or the pay-to-rely concept in maybe a way of sharing their precedents or making more of their templates available in a different fashion than they currently are. So whether or not it results in support for LawFi DAO, or even just changing the existing delivery of legal services, or making them more clear which lawyer you need to speak to, as Baron pointed out, that's still a successful metric for LawFi DAO, I think. So can you see the screen? I've found my way back to the wizard now. and this is so helpful, because hopefully it updates. But we could do here, you can see me typing it in, which is a very easy interface for me as a non-programmer, that this is us literally possibly creating our token, as easy as it is, coming up with our ticker, and it's making it a lot easier for me to be writing the code, or helping me to fill in the variable parts of the code to apply to our to LawFi DAO. And so again, this is the pre-mint. How many of the supply do we want to mint straight to the LawFi DAO treasury wallet? You know, it's as simple as typing numbers in. But if I just pause at this point here, back in 2017 in the ICO boom, there was a very technical tax question about if total supply was 1 million and you pre-minted, I don't know, 100,000 to the Treasury wallet, which did have controllers, was that a taxable event to the people, whether they be in partnership or some other entity characterization? And if it was a taxable event, what is the market value of all of those pre-minted tokens at the time that they're received into the Treasury wallet? And it might be 1 cent or something less, but when you're dealing with significant pre-mint numbers, and they were into the millions, sometimes even more than that, then you can still start getting substantial values, even if you've got a very, very nominal value of each individual token. So again, like, that tax treatment is not clear, and I'm sure it would be different around the world, but a prompt to just say, do you actually want to do a pre-mint, or do you want to have a different distribution mechanism, such as a fair launch after a period of use, or more of an airdrop style? And please feel free to speak up as I'm going through this. You can see as well, every time I tick on one of the features, it adds the extra bit of code for us to work through. So I'm just going to untick all of these things at the moment and go to votes. So if you look at the text before I click that, it sort of stops a quarter of the page in. And then we look at the following functions are overrides required by Solidity. So we get the after token transfer function, the mint, and then the burn. So this is where it's probably starting to get beyond a lay person's understanding of what all of that means by clicking that particular button. So maybe at this stage they know that they need a developer's help, but they still don't know that they might need a lawyer's help, or somebody to help them through the tax consequences of by having this burn. What does that trigger in your mind? Is that a disposal event, or is it a cancellation and destruction for tax purposes? And so when you're designing your token, do be mindful of what tax events that you're creating for all of your token holders. It could also be a useful point of reflection. So in the same way that Open Zeppelin has these question mark hover buttons, gives you a bit of an explanation of what you would use those features for. Perhaps we could even have a different column on this, or even an instructional guide, an article that you have up in front of you that sits by you as you're going through the Open Zeppelin experience. The next key part I wanted to point out is the access controls. So what is ownable and the roles. If I just stick with ownable, this is really where, if I read it out, the simple mechanism for a single account authorized for all privileged actions. So I might just choose the LawFi DAO Treasury wallet to be the owner, but that in the Treasury wallet in itself is a multi-sig. So I can't sign something and it just won't go through with a multi-sig. You need at least 2 of the 3 signers. And so even though I specify ownable and it might be owned by a single account, what I actually need to do as a regulator or as the lawyer is figure out who are the people that are signatories on the multi-sig, if that is the case, and on what basis is their authorization to sign. Are they officers? Are they directors? Have they been onboarded and appointed properly? How do we know that they will sign in accordance with the DAO mandate and the vision and purposes? Could they go rogue? What are the security practices that they maintain so as not to share their private keys or their seed phrases? You know, all of these things, it looks like a simple selection button, but if you go deep further, that's where the lawyers can probably have a suite of things that help with the onboarding and the offboarding of members to a multi-sig in particular. But if you don't want to pick ownable, then you can select roles and start to specify your permissioning. Again, it's at this stage you might need a developer's assistance, but you also might need a regulatory lawyer, a tax lawyer, as well as a privacy lawyer for managing all of those permissions and consent. If, for example, the people that have those permissions are kept in a separate database, and there can be harm to their person if that personal and sensitive information is leaked. These are just sort of the high level things that I'm calling out, and for a very basic ERC 20 contract. I'll untick that for a moment. And then upgradability. So you would have seen this being colloquially referred to with protocols that do V1 and then they release V2 or V3 or not. If some parameters in your contract are specified as upgradable, the owner or the controllers through those permissioning, once they sign the transactions to update the parameters, then it's still the same contract. It's just from a certain point in time that the parameters change. So in Uniswap, that might be switching on the fee from 0% to 0.05%. You don't have to change the whole contract. You don't have to deploy a whole new one. It just upgrades that field. But when you do have to make substantial changes, and actually those might be quite minor, that can be where you deploy a whole new version of the smart contract, and you have the need for migrating from V1 to V2, as we saw as the Uniswap protocol went from 1 to 2 to 3 over a period of 18 months. So, and then I'll just skip down here to info, security contact. So you might have heard that there are various bug bounty programs. So even where a smart contract has been security audited, the audit report might still say there are identified issues which haven't been resolved yet, and that they're considered low or medium risk, or maybe even considered high risk, but the particular team that audited just isn't in a position to solve, or the original development team doesn't know how to solve. So you can contact the white hat hackers. Really, this is a call to that they contact somebody if they've identified how to manipulate an existing vulnerability, or if they've found a new one, and to encourage it to be dealt with before people involved in that contract suffer loss. And the bug bounties, the question is whether they're set at an amount that is attractive enough for somebody to report the vulnerability versus to actually go and exploit that vulnerability and try to dispose of the proceeds. And that's why we've seen sanctions against the likes of Tornado Cash on the money laundering, terrorism financing front more so, and we haven't seen any sort of mixer or tumblers sanctioned or be the subject of investigative action from their being involved with an attacker that has exploited a smart contract yet. And then the license, again, who owns the IP? So in this case, you could specify Creative Commons. They've put in MIT, which is a similar sort of open source licensing concept, but at least that's the one legal prompt there to get you to think about licensing. And if we had our way, maybe we would have even one more box to say who is the legal entity responsible in the event that anything goes wrong. Without any contact details like that, I would assume it's this security contact address. So if I even just type in jp@lawfidao.com, it's not actually entering into the contract code. And these contracts are viewable, particularly for the Ethereum blockchain. When you look at Etherscan, you can click on read contract and decipher some of the information from accessing through the Etherscan Block Explorer, but not all Block Explorers have that good quality level of information yet. That's another area for potential reform and just increasing standards, the level and quality of information available on a Block Explorer, and how perhaps interfaces like Open Zeppelin could feed into populating good, reliable data of integrity into those Block Explorers, which most people will probably, more of the mainstream will interface with than with these interfaces. So I'll just pause there. Is that making sense? We can go through in other sessions what the colony or the Aragon or the CaliDAO experience is and compare it, if that would be helpful too.
Thanks, Jodie. This is really cool. Are we intending, I'm just curious about how we are intending to interact with Open Zeppelin. Are we thinking of building our own interface? Are we going to talk to Open Zeppelin and say, hey, we'd like to add legal prompts and tax prompts and, you know, some specific information that might be useful when people are considering the legal compliance dimensions of creating stuff?
Well, depending on what happens at our general meeting, so that's on 14 October, and where the members will have the opportunity to approve a V1 of the white paper. Once we have the mandate over the specific activities that the DAO can engage with, then people like Roy from Pellar Technology, he has mentioned that he can provide some services to mint our to design and mint our tokens. And Paul Kang from Entersoft had mentioned that he can conduct some level, at least, of security audits. Often the bigger projects will get 2 or 3 security audits before they end up deploying. So if and when our scope of activities is finalised and we can go ahead with at least one of our tokens, I imagine that the professionals will get involved. And I don't know actually whether each of them would go through Open Zeppelin or not, but the purposes of me showing you this is for those that can't afford to engage a professional developer initially, or a professional security auditor, which is often the case, and they think that an ERC20 is very easy to deploy. Yeah, what are the things that could help them? And when you're engaging and paying for professional services, they've also had some experience around the edges with the lawyers. So they'll say to their clients, make sure you're getting legal advice. Maybe we've done this before and it raised these concerns. So you have that word of mouth network effect of telling people straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, that, hey, this is not the be all and end all. Also go speak to this lawyer who has done some Web3 stuff before. So you get around that identification problem that Baron was mentioning. Who do I speak to? How do I find them? How much are they going to charge me before I know the exact legal questions that I want to ask?
Because one other thing, I mean, I'm sure people have a lot more creative mind and they can research more than me as a regular person, but I wouldn't imagine anybody being able to go through a lot of those steps without some legal advice. Like, it's not even about whether I need legal advice for this. It is more about I wouldn't know how to proceed through this point. Like a couple of points that you mentioned earlier, I can't remember, wasn't the votes, I think some of the features that you were talking about, like the ownable roles, etc. Like those things, as a regular person who might be interested from a tech perspective and developing a DAO for whatever reasons, I would be extremely surprised if they could even select something based on a general guidance as opposed to anything a bit more specific.
Sorry, just struggling to get off mute there. But yeah, I think it does rely on you getting a professional developer to help you, even in some respects, even to give you a more detailed overview of what's going on with each of these fields. maybe we read more and go through, but yeah, even if there was, you know, we could aim for a standard little symbol instead of the question mark. There's a Law-Fi DAO button that says, hey, here's what we have to say about when you're up to making this decision. So just getting that standardization and the recognition of that law is a part of these decisions is one of the main aims.
A good option, but I'm literally just thinking off the top of my head, would be even if you probably get talk to probably 10 non-legal people, and just if you take them through what you just took us through and see what all other points where a non-legal person would get would trip on, and just even if there is a basic blog post or a general write-up that these are the legal considerations, if you're comfortable, you know, that just raising a flag that these are the things which you might need to be comfortable about before you pick up. Like if I was setting up a DAO, I wouldn't think about these things. I wouldn't know what I don't know. So just, it doesn't have to be, there might be 8 out of 10 things which everybody would be comfortable about, but there might be 1 or 2 things which they'd be like, yeah, even if we figure out by ourselves, I don't think we'd want to do it by ourselves.
I think this would be a great, a great idea, and building on that, opportunity for a panel or a presentation. There's so many fintech, digital asset, crypto conferences that are looking for interesting content. Going through something like this in a live environment and having a lawyer on the panel, having an accountant whiz on the panel. I'm totally dobbing you in, by the way. This would be like a really practical example and a great way to get the message about the Law-Fi DAO and what it does out into the community.
Well, and excuse me, I skipped over this before, but the pausable is a really poignant feature, because I don't think that many ERC20 contracts turn it on, but this could be something that excuse me, that replicates a trading halt or a market halt action. You know, if a share is listed on you know, the likes of Australian Stock Exchange, and there's something that's going on that says, no, we need to halt trading in these shares because of this particular event, or, you know, based on market conditions. The criticism against centralized token exchanges and decentralized exchanges is that once they list a token, they can't halt the trading in it. And if they halt the trading that other centralized exchanges don't, then they're limiting their customers from being informed and being able to act more responsively to market information. So by putting this pausable function in at the contract level, and it relates to only owner, see how it refers to only owner can pause. So that goes back to, you know, whether I've selected owner here, and that goes back to the single account. In this case, it would be the Law-Fi DAO Treasury, or if we thought that it's more prudent to appoint a panel or a specific subcommittee of experts in financial market trading, then they would be responsible for supervising and overseeing the global crypto markets and maybe just macro markets generally, macro conditions, and being responsible for saying when there should be a pause to trading in the token. And now this gets closer to principles of financial market infrastructure, but then each national or domestic regime takes a different approach to, slightly nuanced approaches to when trading in a token, trading in a financial instrument should be paused. So this I don't think is used enough, and for good reason. because it introduces centralization. But this one, I think we could spend a whole number of days, actually probably a whole thesis, on how this relates to existing powers to halt trading in certain markets. Okay, all right, well, that's really all I wanted to go through today, unless there's any items left for further consideration.
I had two for the team. So the first one is a notional client or a beta client for the DAO, but it sounds like I'm probably a bit too early. If we need to wait and make sure that all of the membership wants to proceed with testing and proving out P2LI. So I will go back to the client and see if they're happy to wait. And I think they will, so that would be good. And then the other thing was I had an additional insurance oracle in the form of a human that might be able to give us a little bit more insight into some of the more unusual insurance arrangements. So Nathan Goodall is queued and ready to jump in on a call if you'd like to have him, or I can ask him to come back next Friday if everybody needs to go to lunch.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. We're almost at the 1:45 mark now, so let's defer his contribution to next Friday if he's available. That'd be fantastic, because trying to pick apart the insurance exposure and what goes to the underlying core contributor, even though they're going through LawFi DAO as the platform, versus what LawFi DAO as a platform needs to be covered from, and what nature of claims reach into the LawFi DAO insurance pool. It'd be great to just get some informal reactions and feedback from Nathan.
Awesome. He's a bit of a character, so I am giving everyone full warning.
Yeah, that's okay. Robust feedback is very welcome. So,
cool.
All right. No, thank you very much for your contributions today, and we'll see you in the next one. Oh, Baron, did you have a question?
No, I was just saying bye. I need to run off for the flight to Gold Coast. Yep.
All right. No worries. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.